Hey guys, tonight we're walking through the ancient streets of Damascus, the city that once called itself the beating heart of the Arab world. It's the year 1400. The air smells of jasmine and smoke from brass lamps, and the alleys are alive with traders calling out their wares: silk from Aleppo, spices from India, honey from the hills of Lebanon. You pass under the great arch of the Umayyad Mosque, where the marble floor gleams with centuries of prayer, and the muezzin's voice floats through the cool evening air. You can hear the city breathing, slow, proud, unafraid. They call it the jewel of the Levant, the paradise on earth, and honestly, it earns the name. Water channels flow through its gardens, feeding groves of fig and pomegranate. Poets say its rivers are the veins of heaven. The city has stood for thousands of years, from the Arameans and Romans to the caliphs and Mamluks, always wounded, always reborn. At this moment, in the late 14th century, Damascus belongs to the Mamluk Sultanate, the warrior dynasty of Egypt and Syria, descendants of slave soldiers who rose from bondage to rule in the name of Islam. The Sultan in Cairo, Al-Nasir Faraj, governs from afar, but Damascus shines as his brightest possession. Its scholars fill the madrasas, its merchants dominate the caravan routes, its mosques echo with the sermons of learned men who boast that no army on earth could breach its walls. And maybe, for centuries, that was true. The Mongols had tried and failed to hold it. Crusaders came and went, leaving behind only bones and burned banners. Damascus survived them all. Even when plagues swept the land and dynasties fell, the city endured, a stubborn spark of civilization in a world that never stopped burning. You walk through the Souk al-Hamidiyah, the great covered market that smells of leather, sugar and iron. The merchants haggle cheerfully, the way people do when they think tomorrow will be just like today. Children chase each other through the alleys. The call to prayer rolls out again, as it has 5 times a day for 1,000 years. But there's a tremor in the air, a rumour carried by caravans from the east, stories of a conqueror who burns cities for breakfast and builds towers from the skulls of kings. His name is whispered like a curse, Timur, or in Persian, Timuri Lang. Timur the Lame, a warrior from the steppes of Transoxiana who claims descent from Genghis Khan and calls himself the Sword of Islam. He has already crushed Persia, slaughtered the armies of Delhi, and turned Baghdad into a graveyard. The Damascenes hear the stories and laugh nervously. The Mongols were fierce too, they say, and we survived them. But deep down, everyone knows Timur is not like other conquerors. He is not coming to rule, he is coming to burn. Still, life goes on. In the courtyards of the Umayyad Mosque, scholars debate theology under olive trees. One young jurist, Ibn Khaldun, visiting from North Africa, writes in his notes that Damascus is a city where faith and reason share the same breath. He doesn't know that in months that same city will be choking on ash. For now, the Mamluk governor Sudan al-Ajami insists the city is safe. He fortifies the gates, sharpens the swords, and sends letters to Cairo requesting reinforcements. Let Timur come, he boasts. He will find the walls of Damascus taller than his ambition. The people cheer, but the caravans still arrive carrying refugees from the north, families from Anatolia and Iraq, their clothes singed, their eyes hollow. He's coming, they whisper. He's coming for us all. At night, the city's minarets shine like candles against the dark hills. The sound of the river Barada drifts through the orchards, gentle and eternal. Somewhere in the citadel, guards change watch. A merchant locks his shutters, muttering a prayer. The stars over Damascus shimmer as they always have, unconcerned that soon the city below them will burn brighter than they ever have, for all the wrong reasons. Still, you can't help but feel the heartbeat of the place, the hum of continuity, the pulse of people who believe their civilization is indestructible. The Damascenes have rebuilt too many times to imagine finality, and maybe that's what makes what's coming so cruel. When you believe your city is eternal, the fire hurts more. As the spring of 1400 ripens into summer, travellers bring more terrifying news. Timur has crushed Baghdad again. Not conquered, crushed. The streets, they say, are paved with skulls. His soldiers take scholars and craftsmen alive, dragging them east to build his dream city, Samarkand, a capital of beauty built from the ruins of others. He moves westward now, toward Aleppo, the northern sister of Damascus. You can almost hear the hoofbeats already, faint but rhythmic, like thunder beyond the horizon. The Mamluk officers begin drilling their troops. The smiths hammer out new spearheads. The preachers in the mosques thunder about faith and unity, but there's fear beneath the fervour, the kind that seeps into the soil, into the breath, into the lull between prayers. Tonight the lamps in the mosque burn longer than usual. The scholars stay awake reading Quran aloud, the verses echoing through the marble halls. Do not think God unaware of what the wrongdoers do. The people gather at the gates to pray, men and women together, whispering supplications to be spared the fate of Aleppo or Baghdad. And somewhere in the east, under another sky, Timur's horses graze on the ashes of 100 cities. He sits in his tent surrounded by gold, maps, and human skulls stacked like trophies. When his astrologers ask what he desires next, he points west and says, "Damascus, the flower of the Arabs, I will water it with fire." You can almost hear the wind carrying his words across the desert. Damascus sleeps, unknowing, under its perfumed sky. The stars gleam over its domes. The river murmurs through its orchards. And somewhere beyond the horizon, the rider who will burn paradise is already on his way. From the steppes of Central Asia, the storm gathers. Timur, the conqueror the Persians call Sahib Kiran, the lord of the auspicious conjunction, begins to move west, and the world starts to shake beneath his hooves. By 1399 his empire already stretches from the Caspian to the Ganges, from the Oxus to the Persian Gulf. Cities that once glowed with learning, Isfahan, Shiraz, Delhi, now exist only as smouldering names on maps. And yet, he is not satisfied. You stand on the dusty plains near the ruins of Baghdad, watching the horizon shimmer with heat. The scent of smoke and death hangs heavy in the air. Timur sits astride a black horse, armoured in gold and iron. Around him, his banners flutter, crimson silk painted with Quranic verses and the symbol of the wolf. His soldiers, tens of thousands strong, kneel in rows behind him, waiting for his command. They are a mosaic of nations, Turks, Mongols, Persians, Tatars, bound not by loyalty but by fear. God has chosen me, Timur says to his generals, his voice like gravel, to cleanse the world of false kings and weak faith. Damascus will fall as others have fallen. He claims to fight in the name of Islam, but his mercy ends where his ambition begins. For Timur, conquest is both art and obsession. He studies maps like scripture, speaks of cities like chess pieces. In his tent, painted with constellations, he prays before every campaign, not for forgiveness but for victory. And when he wins, he builds pyramids of skulls in the name of divine order. In 1399 he turns his gaze towards Syria, the jewel of the Mamluk Sultanate. The Mamluks, proud warrior slaves from Egypt, had defeated the Mongols a century earlier and ruled the lands of the Prophet's companions. To Timur, that makes them rivals, and rivals are to be destroyed. His army moves like a tide across Persia. Cities surrender and are still razed. The poets say the earth itself trembles when Timur rides. They are not wrong. His banners blot out the sun, his siege engines roll like thunder, and behind them comes the smoke. Always the smoke. Word reaches Aleppo first. The city, proud and ancient, prepares for war. The Mamluk governor rallies his men beneath the citadel, swearing they will die before surrendering, and they do. Timur's forces descend like a sandstorm, waves of cavalry, each wave darker than the last. They fight for days. The streets run with blood, and when it ends, Aleppo is silent. You can imagine the aftermath. The mosques are shattered, the libraries burned, the markets looted. The survivors, those who can still walk, are rounded up. Craftsmen are marched east to Samarkand. Soldiers are impaled along the roads. The skulls of the dead are stacked into towers outside the city walls, so that the wind whistles through them like flutes of bone. Timur calls it a warning. Messengers flee south, their horses bleeding from the ride. They reach Damascus after weeks of hard travel, collapsing at the city gates. "Aleppo is gone," they gasp. "Timur is coming." The city erupts in fear. The governor orders the gates sealed. Watchtowers are repaired, walls reinforced. The forges burn through the night as blacksmiths hammer out swords and spearheads. The mosques fill with supplicants, their prayers a low murmur against the rising dread. In the markets, rumour spreads faster than news. "He has a sword that drinks fire," one merchant whispers. His army numbers more than the stars, says another. Mothers clutch their children tighter. The call to prayer rings louder, as if the muezzins are trying to drown out the hoofbeat still miles away. In Cairo, Sultan al-Nasir Faraj receives the plea for aid. His advisors urge him to act, but Egypt itself teeters on rebellion. "Let Damascus stand," he says bitterly, "until we can stand ourselves." His words are carried by the desert wind, and die before reaching the walls of Damascus. Meanwhile, Timur marches on. He halts only to pray, to feast, and to remind his men that they serve destiny. His army travels light: cavalry, engineers, slaves dragging catapults carved from the bones of previous campaigns. His astrologers tell him the stars are favourable. His mullahs tell him God has blessed the journey. When the Euphrates runs red from his crossings, he laughs and says, "The river has already accepted my sacrifice." By the time his scouts reach the outskirts of Hama, the people of Syria already know resistance means annihilation. One by one, towns surrender: Hama, Homs, Ma'arat, each buying mercy with tribute. But Timur's mercy is short-lived. His soldiers plunder regardless, claiming they are owed the spoils of jihad. And so, as summer burns into autumn, the road to Damascus fills with smoke. Refugees stagger south: farmers, monks, merchants, and soldiers without swords. Behind them the horizon glows orange and the air tastes like copper. Inside Damascus the mood shifts from fear to fury. The scholars preach defiance from their pulpits, invoking the legacy of Saladin. "We are the defenders of the Prophet's city," cries one imam. "God tested the faithful before, and he will test us now." In the gardens of the Ghouta plain, the orchards sway under an ominous wind. The scent of figs mixes with the ash falling from the north. The children who once played by the river now whisper of horsemen made of smoke. By the end of the year the first scouts arrive, Timur's banners gleaming red against the pale desert. They ride ahead of the horde, their trumpets wailing like lost souls. The people climb the walls to watch. What they see is endless. Tents, stretching to the horizon, siege engines rolling forward, the sound of drums that make the air itself vibrate. The governor sends a messenger to Cairo one last time. His message is short: "The fire has reached our walls." No answer comes. Night falls, and the hills beyond the city glow faintly. Campfires of an army so vast it looks like a new constellation born on the earth. The people of Damascus pray louder. The bells of the citadel clang in warning. The dogs bark endlessly, as if they too sense that something monstrous is waiting in the dark. Timur stands outside his tent, looking down at the city lights, his hand resting on his sword. "Tomorrow," he says, "I will see if paradise burns." The generals nod. The drums begin to beat, and as the stars wheel silently above the desert, Damascus, the jewel of the world, prepares to face the storm that has already devoured heaven itself. The horizon burns, dust clouds rise where Timur's armies move, and by the time his vanguard reaches the outskirts of Damascus, the orchards of Ghouta shimmer with the smoke of distant villages already set aflame. It's late October, 1400. The air is thick with the scent of fear and fig leaves. The people of Damascus stand atop their walls staring northward, and what they see looks less like an army and more like a moving continent of iron. Timur's banners stretch across the plain, a forest of scarlet and black. Drums thunder in the distance, deep, rhythmic, almost ritualistic, as lines of cavalry advance in perfect silence. Their armour glints under the pale sun, their lances rise like a field of silver reeds. Behind them come the siege engines, towers on wheels, catapults built from the bones of other cities, massive crossbows capable of hurling spears the size of trees. Inside the walls, the Mamluk governor, Sudun al-Ajami, rallies his men in the citadel. He's a veteran soldier, a man who's seen the Mongols at their height and lived to tell of it. He knows this enemy will not be deterred by prayer alone. He orders the gates sealed and the bridges over the Berada River destroyed. The city's blacksmiths work without pause, hammering nails, arrowheads, and horseshoes. Even the scholars and students carry stones to the ramparts. In the courtyard of the Umayyad Mosque, the ulama gather for counsel. "We have faced invaders before," one says. "The Mongols fell to our swords and God will deliver us again." But others remember Baghdad and Aleppo and fall silent. One young scholar, trembling, whispers, God's mercy is infinite, but Timur's army is faster. As night falls, the first skirmishes begin. Timur's archers test the range of the city's defences, sending volleys of flaming arrows into the outer walls. The defenders respond with their own, torches arcing through the sky like brief, dying stars. The battle is far from the city itself, but its echo fills every street. Women carry water to the walls. Children press their ears to the ground, listening for hoofbeats. The next morning the governor mounts his horse and rides along the battlements. Below him the city unfolds like a tapestry. Gardens, mosques, bazaars, all shimmering in the morning light. He knows what's at stake. If Damascus falls, Syria falls, and with it the heart of the Mamluk Empire. He turns to his men and says, "If we must die, let it be here, where the air still smells of paradise." Beyond the walls, Timur's camp swells into a city of its own. His engineers set up forges and siege workshops. Prisoners from Aleppo are forced to dig trenches. His astrologers study the stars each night, drawing omens in the sand. One reports that Mars' ascendant are a sign of victory. Timur smiles faintly and says, "Then let Mars see a spectacle worthy of him." For a week, the two sides exchange arrows and insults. The Damascenes shout down from the walls, calling Timur a false Muslim, a destroyer of cities. His men respond by catapulting the severed heads of prisoners into the streets. The smell of blood and pitch begins to settle over the city like fog. Still, the people of Damascus do not yield. They pour boiling oil from the towers, unleash stones on the approaching siege engines, and fight like a city possessed. From the minarets, the muezzins call not for prayer but for courage. Stand fast, for God, for the Prophet, for Damascus. Inside the city, life continues in defiance. The markets close, but bakers still light their ovens, and families share bread under candlelight. The scholars gather by lamplight to copy Quranic verses, as if to preserve the soul of the city before it's lost. In the narrow lanes, you hear mothers telling children stories of Saladin and the Crusades, whispering that heroes rise in every generation. But the reality is colder. Cairo has not sent reinforcements. The Sultan's armies are tied up by rebellion, and the roads south are blocked by Timur's scouts. Damascus stands alone. On the 8th day, Timur's envoys approach the walls under white flags. They carry a message sealed with his personal emblem, a wolf's head encircled by stars. The letter is read aloud in the governor's hall. To the nobles and scholars of Damascus, I, Timur, servant of God, conqueror of kings, offer you peace. Submit to my will, pay tribute, and I shall spare your city and your people. Resist, and I will make your gardens ashes and your mosques stables for my horses. The governor frowns. A liar's mercy, he says. The council debates through the night. Some urge surrender, fearing another Aleppo. Others demand defiance. The debate grows heated, prayers turn to shouts. In the end, the governor declares, Damascus bows to no tyrant. The city will fight. At dawn, Timur gives his answer. A horn sounds from his camp, long, low, and terrible. Drums pound in reply. The siege begins in earnest. The ground trembles under the march of engines. Rocks crash against the walls. The air fills with fire. Arrows tipped with burning pitch. Catapult stones smeared with oil. The defenders fight back with everything they have. The sky turns grey with smoke. From the citadel you can see the flames licking at the northern gates, the orchards beyond already blackened. The river Barada runs thick with mud and ash. The sounds of war, iron on stone, men screaming, horses crying, mix into a single, endless roar. Inside the city, people rush to the mosques, praying aloud, their voices echoing off marble. "O God, protect Damascus, the blessed of your cities," cries the Imam. Outside, Timur's catapults answer with thunder. Night falls again, but it brings no peace. The city glows faintly under the orange haze of firelight. On the horizon, the conqueror's camp burns even brighter. Somewhere beyond the gates, Timur watches the city through the smoke and whispers to his general, "They think they can defy the sky." He raises his hand. "Then let us show them how the sky burns." And with that the order goes out. More fire, more stone, more fury. The siege of Damascus has begun. The siege drums never stop. Day and night the ground trembles beneath them, until even the stones of Damascus seem to pulse, in rhythm with Timur's rage. You wake to their pounding and fall asleep to it. if you can sleep at all. By early November 1400, the plain outside the walls is a vast sea of tents, smoke, and firelight. The orchards of Ghouta, once famous for their cool shade and scent of orange blossoms, are now stripped bare, their trees cut to feed Timur's war machines. From the northern gate you can see the shattered remnants of Aleppo's refugees stumbling into the city, the lucky few who survived the slaughter. They speak of nightmares, towers of skulls, rivers of blood, children carried away in chains. He builds monuments of the dead, one mutters in a cracked voice. The governor listens grimly and orders more guards to the gates. But everyone knows what that means. Timur is close, and his mercy is only ever a pause between massacres. The Mamluk frontier, once thought strong, is now a rumour. The Sultan's banners, promised weeks ago, have not appeared. The defenders of Damascus must stand alone. The citadel, a fortress of pale limestone, rises like a stubborn tooth at the heart of the city. Inside, soldiers sharpen their scimitars by lamplight, whispering prayers between strokes of the whetstone. Outside, the mosques fill every evening with supplications that sound less like faith and more like pleading. "Do not let us fall as Aleppo fell," one imam cries during the Friday sermon. "Do not let our city be swallowed by fire." But faith cannot silence the siege. Timur's engineers set up enormous mangonels, their arms creaking under the weight of boulders. Each impact shakes the walls like thunder. Whole sections crumble. The defenders race to patch them with wood, mud, anything they can find. Boys no older than 15 carry buckets of water to douse fires, while their fathers hurl stones from the battlements. Then comes the real horror. Timur orders corpses from his previous battles, already stiff and decaying, to be catapulted over the walls. It's psychological warfare at its foulest. Within days, disease spreads through the lower quarters. The once fragrant air of Damascus turns sour. The city that smelled of roses and spice now reeks of death. Still, the people refuse to break. The women sew bandages in the mosques, singing softly to drown out the screams. The blacksmiths hammer weapons until their hands bleed. Every alley becomes a fortress, every roof a lookout. The governor rides through the streets at night, shouting encouragement. "Hold the gates! Cairo will come!" But even he no longer believes it. On the 10th day, Timur shifts his strategy. Instead of frontal assaults, his cavalry surrounds the city completely. No one enters or leaves. The siege tightens like a noose. Food runs low. The price of bread triples. Water from the Barada River is cut off by enemy camps. People begin drinking from wells fouled by ash and corpses. And still the drums go on. From his command tent, Timur watches it all with chilling detachment. He's not a man of rage, but of method. "They will fight hardest for what they love most," he tells his lieutenants, "so we will burn it first." His archers light their arrows and fire them into the gardens, the pride of Damascus, its emerald belt of paradise. Within hours, the orchards are burning, their trees snapping in the heat. The smoke drifts over the walls, turning the sky black. From the city, people watch their gardens, their lifeblood, become a pyre. Some weep openly, others curse the heavens. In the chaos, refugees flood toward the city centre. The narrow streets choke with carts and livestock. The Umayyad Mosque, once a sanctuary, now shelters hundreds of terrified families. Children cling to the marble columns, their cries echoing against the ancient mosaics. A muezzin still climbs the minaret and calls for prayer through the smoke. His voice cracks but never falters. Inside the citadel, the governor convenes his council. "We cannot hold forever," says one general. "If the Sultan has not sent aid by now, he never will." Another bangs his fist on the table. "Better to die on our feet than live on our knees." The governor looks toward the window where the flames of Ghouta reflect in his eyes. "We will fight," he says quietly, "but if the city must fall, let it fall with honour." That night the defenders launch a surprise raid. Under cover of darkness, a detachment of Mamluk cavalry slips out the eastern gate and charges Timur's lines. It's a desperate gamble. For a moment it works. The outer siege lines are thrown into confusion, tents torn apart, fires scattered. The Damascenes watching from the walls cheer as the riders vanish into the night, but Timur is not fooled. He orders his reserve cavalry to encircle them. By dawn, the raiders are gone, every one of them cut down or captured. Timur commands that their heads be piled into a pyramid facing the city. "So that they may still watch the sunrise," he says coldly. The morale inside the walls breaks. The people begin to whisper about surrender. The governor silences them with threats, but his own soldiers now glance nervously toward the horizon. Smoke rises from every direction. The gardens are gone, the food is gone, and still there is no help. By the end of the month, Damascus is a city under siege in every sense. By enemy, by hunger, by despair. The night sky glows red, and even the stars seem dimmer. The citizens pray that the dawn will bring salvation, but dawn only brings the sound of the drums again, the same dull, relentless heartbeat of conquest. Outside, Timur sits in his chair of carved ivory, wrapped in furs despite the desert heat. His astrologer kneels beside him. "The stars favour you, my lord," he whispers. Timur doesn't look up. His gaze is fixed on the walls of Damascus, where flames flicker faintly between the towers. "The stars," he says, "favour those who make their own heaven." He raises his hand and the signal is given. The great siege engines creak forward. The drums roll like thunder, and somewhere deep inside the city, someone whispers the truth that no one wants to believe. Paradise is about to burn. The smoke from the burning gardens rolls over Damascus like a second dawn. By November's end, the sky has turned the colour of iron, and the city beneath it breathes in ash. You can taste it on your tongue. Dry, bitter, final. The orchards of Ghouta, once the lungs of the city, are gone. Only black trunks remain, clawing at the sky. Refugees pour through the gates by the hundreds, their faces grey with soot, their stories darker still. "Timur is coming," they cry. "He burned Hama, he burned Homs, he builds mountains of skulls where cities stood." Inside the walls, Damascus braces for its fate. The governor, Sudun al-Ajami, issues his final decrees. All citizens capable of carrying weapons are to take up arms. Wells must be rationed, food distributed only through the mosques. The city prepares for the unthinkable, a siege not of days, but of destruction. And yet, beneath the fear, life clings on. At the Umayyad Mosque, prayers echo louder than ever. Men and women crowd the marble courtyard, heads bowed, hands raised toward a sky they can no longer see through the smoke. "O God," the Imam cries, "protect Damascus, the heart of your believers." His voice breaks, but the crowd answers anyway, hundreds, then thousands, whispering "Amin." The Mamluk soldiers stand watch along the walls, their armour caked with soot, their eyes hollow from sleepless nights. They have heard that the Sultan in Cairo still debates whether to send reinforcements. "He debates," one soldier spits, "while we die." Still, they fight, driven by pride and the faint hope that somehow the city might endure as it always has. Every night the citizens hear the enemy outside, the clang of hammers on metal, the neigh of horses, the laughter of soldiers. Timur's camp stretches so far that even from the citadel you can see its flickering glow on the horizon like an endless wildfire. One night, under the blood-red moon, Timur's men build a great scaffold of wood and pitch facing the northern gate. When dawn breaks, the Damascens climb the walls to see what it is and freeze in horror. Hanging from the scaffold are prisoners taken from Aleppo, impaled and left for the vultures. Beneath them, written in Arabic on a banner, are the words, "This is the mercy of Timur." The message is clear. Inside the city, panic spreads. The markets empty. Grain becomes worth its weight in silver. Water carriers are mobbed in the streets. Rumours crawl through the alleys like snakes. Some say the governor plans to flee. Others whisper that the scholars are already negotiating surrender. In one corner of the city, an old man, a scholar named Ibn Khaldun, still trapped there on his journey from Cairo, writes in his journal by candlelight. He describes the mood of the people. They speak of death with the calm of those who have already died. Yet even in despair they do not cease their prayers. It is as if faith itself is their last fortress. The governor summons the scholars and imams to council. "Shall we surrender?" he asks. "Or shall we burn before we bow?" The room falls silent. The imam of the Umayyad Mosque finally speaks. "We are the people of Damascus," he says. "We have buried conquerors before, but if you surrender now, he will take our souls as well as our walls." Sudun nods slowly. "Then we fight." For 3 more days the siege intensifies. Timur's mangonels pound the northern wall until it cracks like an old bone. Arrows rain down like locusts. The defenders pour boiling oil and pitch from the towers, their faces lit by the flames of war. The city quakes beneath each impact. Then, on the fourth morning, a strange silence falls. The drums stop. The archers cease firing. The plain beyond the walls lies still. From his command tent, Timur sends word. He wishes to speak. Envoys ride out from the city under white flags, imams, jurists, and noblemen, their faces drawn with exhaustion. They are brought before Timur himself. He sits on a golden throne in a tent lined with silks and weapons. Behind him, the severed heads of enemy generals stare from pikes. "Tell me," Timur says softly, "why does Damascus resist the will of God?" One of the scholars, trembling but brave, answers, "Because we do not believe that God wills destruction, my lord." Timur smiles faintly. Then perhaps he wills a lesson. He offers terms: surrender the city peacefully, pay tribute, and no harm will come to its people. His words sound calm, even pious. The envoys exchange weary glances. They have seen what happens to those who defy him. They agree to his terms. What choice do they have? When they return to Damascus, they announce the peace. The gates will open the next morning. The soldiers lay down their arms, mothers weep with relief, merchants reopen their shops. The people believe, desperately, foolishly, that the worst is over. That night, under a sky choked with smoke, the governor walks through the quiet streets. For the first time in weeks, the city sleeps. Only the muezzins stay awake, their voices soft and steady, calling for the final prayers of the day. The sound carries through the alleys like a lullaby. You stand at the gate and look out toward Timur's camp. The fires burn low. The plain is still. For a moment you dare to believe that peace might truly come. But beyond the darkness, in his tent, Timur sharpens his sword. His generals wait. "Tomorrow," he says, "they will open their gates to us as guests." He smiles, the faintest glimmer of cruelty in his eyes. "And we shall show them," he whispers, "what guests we are." The wind rises, carrying the scent of smoke and the faint echo of drums. Somewhere in the city a dog begins to bark, restless and afraid. Damascus sleeps, and the fire dreams of morning. Morning comes cold and bright over Damascus, though the sunlight feels wrong. Too pale, too clean, as if it knows what it's about to illuminate. The city wakes before dawn. The muezzin's call drifts through the smoky air, echoing from the minarets that have stood since the caliphs of old. But this time, the prayer sounds like a farewell. After weeks of siege, hunger, and horror, the gates of Damascus are about to open. The governor's decree has been read in every quarter. The city has accepted Timur's peace. Tribute will be paid. No blood will be spilled. The people are to remain calm, stay in their homes, and trust in the conqueror's mercy. You stand among the crowd gathered at Bab al-Sagir, one of the city's great gates. The smell of smoke still hangs heavy, but there's something else in the air. Hope, cautious and fragile, like a bird trying to fly with broken wings. Mothers clutch their children. Merchants hold scrolls of property deeds, hoping to protect what remains of their livelihoods. A few soldiers stand silently beside them, their armour dented, their eyes hollow. Above, on the ramparts, the Mamluk banners flutter weakly in the wind. The gate creaks open with a groan that seems to echo across the centuries. Beyond it lies the plain, empty at first, then filling slowly with riders. Timur's banners appear on the horizon, bright red and gold under the rising sun. From the citadel, the governor watches grimly. He has done what he must. Cairo never came. His men are exhausted. The city's wells are poisoned and its granaries empty. Better a conqueror's mercy, he thinks, than extinction. The first riders enter, Timur's envoys, followed by rows of disciplined soldiers in lamella armour, their faces hidden behind iron masks. They carry the wolf standard of the Timurid Empire and the Quran held aloft, as if to sanctify what is about to unfold. "The Lord of the auspicious conjunction," their herald shouts, "has come in peace." The people kneel. Timur rides in on a white horse, his armour glinting like frost. He looks around, expressionless, taking in the beauty of the city, the marble gates, the winding streets, the golden dome of the Umayyad mosque catching the light. "This," he murmurs, "is worth burning." He dismounts and orders a halt. The governor, Sudun al-Ajami, approaches with a group of scholars and elders. They bow deeply. "Welcome, my lord," the governor says. "Damascus submits to your greatness. We beg you to treat her as a jewel in your crown, not ashes beneath your feet." Timur's lips curve in something almost like kindness. "I am not a man who destroys what serves him," he says. "Your city shall be safe, its people untouched. You have my word." And with that he orders his men to camp outside the walls. The gates close again. Inside, the city exhales for the first time in months. Bells ring from the citadel. The mosques fill with prayers of relief. "We are spared," people shout. "Timur has kept his word." But those who have seen him before, the refugees from Aleppo, the survivors of Baghdad, do not celebrate. They have heard these same words before. For 3 days, peace holds. Timur receives gifts and envoys in his grand tent outside the walls. Caravans arrive bearing silk, gold, and rare books. He praises the scholars, invites the imams to dine with him, asks to see the city's wonders. "I have heard," he says, "that the Umayyad Mosque is the envy of the world." The imams beam with pride and agree to take him. Timur enters the city again, this time with only a small escort. He walks through the bazaar, past the spice merchants and calligraphers, his sharp eyes missing nothing. The people watch from their doors, silent, trembling. Inside the Umayyad Mosque, he pauses. The light slants through coloured glass, painting the marble in gold and green. The mosaics shimmer with scenes of paradise, trees, rivers, endless gardens. "So," he says softly, "this is what they call heaven on earth." The chief imam bows. "This mosque," he says proudly, "was built by the Caliph al-Walid in the time of the Companions. It has stood for centuries as a beacon of faith." Timur smiles faintly. "Then, let it also stand as a lesson." That night, as the people sleep, Timur's soldiers receive new orders. The next morning they begin to inspect the city's gates and guard posts. They replace the Mamluk sentries. By sunset, every gate is in Timurid hands. The trap is closed. The governor realizes too late what's happening. He rushes to the citadel to rally his troops, but Timur's men are already scaling its walls. The gates of the fortress burst open. Arrows rain down like fire. Within hours, the citadel, the heart of Damascus's defense, is under siege from within. The city erupts in panic. From every direction Timur's soldiers pour in, through the gates, through breaches in the walls, through tunnels dug beneath the foundations. The peace was a ruse, the mercy a mask. The conqueror's true face has returned. In the narrow alleys, people run blindly, clutching children and Qurans. Flames bloom where soldiers toss torches into wooden roofs. The sound of breaking glass and shattering doors fills the air. The markets that once smelled of cinnamon and leather now reek of smoke and blood. At the mosque, the imam who had welcomed Timur climbs the minaret to call the people to prayer one last time. As he begins to recite the adhan, a flight of arrows cuts through the smoke. His voice stops mid-verse. From the citadel, the governor's banners are torn down. Timur's standard, the wolf and stars, rises in their place. By nightfall, the city is burning. Timur watches from a hill outside the walls, his face lit by the orange glow. "They called this paradise," he says quietly to his general, "but every paradise needs a fire to test its worth." The general bows his head. "Shall we stop them, my lord?" Timur doesn't answer. He only watches, eyes cold, as Damascus begins to melt under its own light. The governor's last message, scratched onto parchment before he is captured, reads only, "We opened our gates to mercy, and death walked in smiling." The fire begins at dusk. First, a few scattered plumes of smoke rise from the northern quarter, curling lazily into the bruised evening sky. Then the flames leap from roof to roof, feeding on timber, cloth, and panic. Within an hour, the blaze roars through the city like a living thing. Damascus, the queen of the Levant, the city of gardens and silk, becomes a torch visible for miles across the desert. You stand in the Souk al-Hamidiyah, the great market, and the air burns your lungs. The narrow alleys that once smelled of saffron and soap now stink of smoke and charred flesh. Merchants throw buckets of water on their shops, shouting, weeping, trying to save even a scrap of their lives' work. Sparks dance in the air like fireflies, settling onto awnings and igniting them in bursts of red light. Outside, Timur's army surges through the gates. They come not as soldiers, but as scavengers. The conqueror's promise of mercy dissolves in the roar of steel. Doors are smashed open, homes pillaged. Mosques become stables, schools become barracks, fountains run black with soot. Timur's men shout their war cry, a sound halfway between laughter and thunder. The Umayyad Mosque, the pride of the city, becomes a battlefield. Worshippers who had fled there for safety find themselves trapped as soldiers pour in. Arrows hiss through the air, shattering lamps and windows, the mosaics of paradise. Those ancient, glittering scenes of gardens and rivers catch fire. The gold leaf curls, the walls blacken, and the dome above cracks in the heat. A chronicler watching from a nearby rooftop writes, "The fire rose higher than the minarets, and the night turned brighter than day. The city was filled with the cries of women and the neighing of horses, and the smoke blotted out the stars. The citadel still holds, for now. Mamluk soldiers inside fight like men already dead, firing arrows until their fingers bleed. They repel 3 assaults before dawn, the last under a rain of fireballs from Timur's catapults. The sky glows orange and green, and every gust of wind brings down new sparks upon the city below. Timur watches from his command post on Mount Qasyun, overlooking the valley. From there, Damascus looks like a bowl of flame, the Barada River gleaming faintly through the smoke. He sits cross-legged, wrapped in furs, a golden cup of wine in his hand. His generals stand behind him in silence. "Write this in the histories," he says. "I offered peace to Damascus. They chose pride. Now let pride be their monument." His chronicler, obedient and terrified, dips his pen into ink and begins to write, though what he's really recording is not history but justification. Inside the walls, the nightmare has no logic. The fire spreads faster than thought. Families flee into the streets only to find them blocked by Timur's soldiers. Some are cut down, others are herded into courtyards and locked in as the flames climb higher. The screams are constant, a sound that becomes almost physical, pressing against your ears like wind. At the Umayyad Mosque, a group of scholars and students form a human chain, trying to rescue Quranic manuscripts from the burning libraries. They carry them out into the square, pages fluttering like dying birds. But the smoke is too thick. One by one they fall, clutching the sacred texts to their chests. A muezzin, refusing to abandon his post, climbs the minaret and calls the adhan into the inferno. His voice is hoarse, broken, but the words carry Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. It is both prayer and farewell. Moments later, the minaret collapses in a shower of sparks. In the Christian quarter, churches are looted and burned alongside mosques. The conqueror's fury knows no distinction. In the Jewish quarter, families barricade their doors with furniture and pray. The air hums with terror and faith in equal measure. And yet, amid the chaos, you see strange acts of mercy. A Mamluk soldier throws himself between a mother and a charging horseman. A merchant opens his home to shelter his neighbours, lowering buckets of water from the roof to douse the flames. In a courtyard near the east gate, women tend to wounded strangers, tearing strips from their own clothes to bind bleeding hands. Even as the city dies, humanity refuses to. By midnight, the citadel is surrounded. Timur's men drag forward siege ladders, shouting triumphantly. Arrows rain down from the ramparts, but the defenders are too few. Inside, the wounded fill every corridor. The governor himself, Sudun al-Ajami, fights at the gate, his sword streaked black with soot. He refuses to surrender. From the hill, Timur sees the struggle and smiles. "He fights well," he says. "I'll make sure he dies slowly." By dawn, the citadel's outer wall collapses. Timur's troops surge in, hacking their way through the defenders. The courtyard becomes a slaughterhouse. The last of the Mamluks die surrounded, refusing to yield even as fire consumes the fortress. When it's over, the conqueror enters through the smouldering gate. The air inside the citadel is hot enough to sear the lungs. Charred bodies lie everywhere. Soldiers, servants, horses, all indistinguishable under the soot. Timur dismounts and walks among them, his boots crunching on ashes. He turns to his chronicler. "Write this too," he says. "Let it be known that I spared the lives of artisans, scholars, and those who serve knowledge. The rest were tested by fire." He orders the surviving craftsmen and scholars rounded up and brought before him. Those who can recite poetry, design buildings, or forge weapons are spared, though not free. They are to be sent east to Samarkand, where they will build his dream city, his empire of beauty on a foundation of bones. The rest, soldiers, merchants, peasants, are left to the flames. When the sun rises, Damascus is a skeleton. The air hums with heat, the ground smoulders beneath your feet. The gardens are gone, the palaces gutted, the marble of the Umayyad mosque cracked like old bone. Timur stands at the city gate and watches the smoke drift toward the horizon. "So ends the pride of Syria," he says. "Let its ashes feed the roses of Samarkand." Behind him his generals bow low. The army moves on, leaving behind silence, the kind of silence that only follows absolute ruin. And beneath that silence, under the soot and rubble, the heart of Damascus still beats, faint but unbroken, waiting for a season when gardens might grow again. For 3 days and nights, the fires devour Damascus. They eat wood, stone, and flesh alike, climbing the minarets, curling around the domes, crawling along the walls until the city glows like the sun itself. When at last the flames begin to die, only smoke remains, thick, choking, endless. It clings to the ruins like mourning cloth. The jewel of the Levant is gone, and in its place stands a skeleton of ash. You walk through the streets that were once gardens of light. The marble paving is cracked and scorched. The air still hums with heat. The Souk al-Hamidiyya is gone. Nothing left but twisted metal and the faint smell of cinnamon burned into the earth. The great gates, once proud with Mamluk banners, hang torn and blackened. Cats and crows pick through the ashes. Here and there you see survivors, silent shapes moving through the smoke. A mother leads 2 children barefoot through the ruins, their faces grey with soot. An old man kneels beside what was once his home, scooping handfuls of earth as if he could rebuild the past with his hands. The river Barada runs low and foul, reflecting the orange haze of the sky, and above it all stands Timur, the Lord of Fire, watching from his camp on the hill. His soldiers have done their work and now they begin the collection. Gold, slaves, books, and anything of worth. "Bring me the scholars," he says. "Bring me the artisans. Bring me the beauty that remains." His men scour the ruins for survivors with talent. Potters, calligraphers, stonemasons, all are gathered and dragged to the plain outside the walls. They will not be killed, but taken east to Samarkand, where Timur is building what he calls the city of the world's desire. He believes he's preserving civilization, even as he destroys it. In his tent, surrounded by treasures looted from Damascus, Timur receives a delegation of scholars and judges. Their faces are pale, their robes torn. They bow low before him. "Great Lord," says one trembling imam, "spare what remains of this blessed city. Its people are broken, its mosques are holy. God will reward your mercy." Timur looks at him with cold amusement. "Mercy," he says. "I have already shown mercy. I could have levelled every stone. Instead, I will take what is valuable and leave the rest to remember me." He turns to his scribe. "Write that I found Damascus rebellious, and I made it humble. Write that I brought wisdom to Samarkand from the heart of the Arabs. Let the future know that Timur took knowledge, not lives." Outside, the soldiers laugh as they herd prisoners into long columns. Thousands of men, women, and children, artisans, scholars, scribes, bound together and marched east under the whip. Among them is a famous calligrapher named Yaqut al-Mustasimi, his hands wrapped in cloth to protect his fingers from frost and chains. He will decorate Timur's palaces, his mosques, his tomb, his art the only mercy left from the ashes of Damascus. The city itself lies under martial law. Patrols sweep the streets, killing any who resist. The few remaining wells are claimed for the conqueror's men. Food is taken, livestock slaughtered, the surviving. Citizens dig through the debris for anything that might sustain them. A jar of grain, a crust of bread, a memory. At the Umayyad Mosque, now a ruin of cracked marble and ash, a group of clerics gathers what remains of the Quranic manuscripts. They find pages scattered across the courtyard, some half-burned, others intact. One old imam kneels and begins to recite from memory, "Do not despair of the mercy of God." His voice trembles, but the others join him, their prayers rising into the grey air, a fragile defiance against oblivion. Timur hears them from his camp. He doesn't order them silenced. Perhaps he finds the sound fitting, a hymn for his triumph, or perhaps he's simply tired. He sits alone that night staring at the black horizon. They will rebuild, he murmurs to himself. They always rebuild. His general standing nearby bows his head. And when they do, my lord? Timur smiles faintly. Then they will tell stories of how we burned their heaven, and that will make their heaven worth something. When the fires finally gutter out, the conqueror gives his last order. The citadel, the heart of Damascus's pride, is to be looted and partially dismantled. Its stones will be used to build fortifications elsewhere, its bronze doors melted into weapons. The great libraries are emptied. The books, if they cannot be carried, are tossed into the river. The water runs black for days. By the end of winter, Timur prepares to leave. His carts are heavy with gold and manuscripts. His prisoners number in the tens of thousands. As his army marches out, the sound of their boots and hooves shakes the earth one final time. Behind them, the survivors crawl from hiding. They move through the ruins like ghosts calling names into the silence. Some find loved ones buried in the rubble. Others find only ashes. The city's birds have fled. Even the dogs are gone. But Damascus is not dead. The people gather near the Breada and begin to clear the debris stone by stone. They light small fires for warmth, and in those tiny sparks you can see it. The stubborn, impossible persistence that has saved this city through every catastrophe in history. They bury their dead in silence, then plant seeds in the ash. A woman pours a handful of clean water into the dirt and says softly, "God willing, roses will grow again." And perhaps they will. For no empire, no conqueror, no fire lasts forever. Timur will ride on to conquer Baghdad again, to burn Anatolia, to dream of China, and one day he will die, his bones buried far away beneath a turquoise dome. But Damascus will live, its smoke will clear, its gardens will return, its call to prayer will rise again. And though it will never forget the fire, it will never let the fire define it. By the time the last embers die, Damascus lies in a silence so deep it feels unnatural. The wind moves through the streets, stirring ashes into ghostly spirals. Where laughter once echoed, only the soft creak of burnt wood remains. Yet among the ruins, life begins its slow return, cautious, trembling, but unstoppable. The conqueror's army has moved on. Timur has departed for Baghdad, leaving behind only a garrison of his men to keep the city obedient. They patrol the gates with foreign eyes and foreign tongues, speaking of Samarkand, where the stolen artisans will build blue-domed palaces that shine like stolen sky. They say Timur sleeps peacefully, believing Damascus is finished. He is wrong. You walk through the devastated quarters with the first groups of survivors who dare to emerge. The streets are unrecognizable. The great bazaar of Al-Hamidiyya is nothing but ribs of iron and collapsed stone. The Umayyad mosque, its marble blackened and roof half collapsed, still stands. A broken shell of what once was, yet somehow still beautiful. Birds nest in its scorched arches. The air still smells faintly of myrrh and smoke, and yet, even in this ruin, you find people rebuilding. At the edge of the Brada River, women wash the soot from charred linens. In a courtyard near Bab Sharki, an old man sets up a makeshift stall selling bread baked from whatever flour he can find. His hands tremble, but when asked why he bothers, he only says, "Because a city dies when its people stop selling bread." In the narrow alleyways, children sift through the rubble, looking for coins or pottery fragments to trade. One finds a half-burnt manuscript, the ink still faintly legible. He takes it to a surviving scholar, who weeps as he reads the first verse. God is the light of the heavens and the earth. It becomes a whispered motto among the survivors. The light is not gone. A few days later, a small group of Sufi mystics gathers in the ruins of a zawiya, a monastery of prayer and meditation. Their sheikh, a man with soot still in his beard, raises his hands and says, "The fire has purified us. What was pride has burned away. What remains is what God has chosen to remain." They begin to chant softly, verses of hope drifting through the smoke like healing. The sound spreads. People stop to listen. For the first time since the siege began, tears fall not from fear but from something close to faith. The surviving Mamluk soldiers, gaunt and ragged, emerge from the citadel's ruins. They are leaderless now, their commander executed, their banners burned, but they still walk the streets as protectors. They organize patrols to keep looters away. They bury the dead in shallow graves beyond the walls. For every corpse they find, they whisper a prayer. To God we belong, and to him we return. Among the ruins, Ibn Khaldun, who somehow survived Timur's conquest, writes quietly in his journal. His words are steady, his script elegant even by candlelight. I have seen the rise and fall of empires. Each claims to be eternal, yet none endures. But cities, though broken, remember how to live. Damascus will live. He leaves the city soon after, carrying with him the record of its fall and its resilience. His writings will survive for centuries, long after Timur's empire has crumbled into dust. In the months that follow, survivors from the countryside begin to trickle back. Farmers from the Ghouta plains return to find their orchards burned, their wells poisoned. They kneel in the ash and start again, planting fig trees beside the blackened roots of old ones. When the first leaves sprout months later, the city gathers to celebrate. Damascus lives, they say. The fire could not take that. By spring, the river runs clearer. The markets reopen, first as makeshift tents, then as proper stalls. The clatter of hammers replaces the sound of drums. New roofs rise over old foundations, and though the scars remain, the walls scorched, the stones cracked, the rhythm of life returns. From the minarets, the call to prayer sounds again. The muezzin's voices tremble at first, as if the city itself needs time to remember how to pray aloud. But by the second week, the sound grows stronger. It echoes across the river, through the ruins, over the graves of the fallen, and out into the plains where Timur's army once camped. People begin to tell stories of the fire, and of those who endured it. The woman who baked bread every morning even when her house was gone, the imam who saved Qur'ans from the burning mosque, the children who carried water to strangers. In each retelling, the terror fades, and what remains is defiance. One evening, a poet stands in the courtyard of the half-rebuilt mosque and recites new verses. We have seen the fire walk through our streets, and still the jasmine blooms. Empires fall, conquerors fade, but the fragrance of Damascus endures. The people listen in silence, and when he finishes, someone whispers, Amin. Far away, Timur rides toward the next conquest, leaving Syria behind. His empire will stretch farther than any since Genghis Khan's, but it will not last. Within a generation of his death it will fracture, his descendants turning on one another. The cities he burned will rise again. The scholars he enslaved will pass their knowledge to others. The beauty he stole will outlive him. And in Damascus, as always, life will weave new stories from the ashes of the old. The smoke will fade, the sky will clear, and the river will sing again. Because this city has learned something no conqueror ever understood. You can burn its walls, but not its memory. When you walk through its streets now, centuries later, you can still feel it. In the scent of jasmine after rain, in the call to prayer at dusk, in the stubborn heartbeat that has outlasted fire, plague, and empire alike. Damascus does not die, it endures. By the time word of Damascus's destruction reaches Cairo, winter has settled over the Nile. Courtiers whisper the news to Sultan al-Nasir Faraj, son of Bark, who sits upon the Mamluk throne. His father had been a conqueror, he himself is barely a man. The messenger kneels, eyes downcast, and delivers the words that chill every heart in the palace. Damascus has fallen, Timur has burned it. The Sultan says nothing at first. He looks out across the palace gardens, their fountains glittering in the pale light. And the governor? He finally asks. The messenger hesitates. Dead, my lord. The city stands no more. Faraj slams his fist against the marble railing. God curse him, that cripple from the east! But his rage is hollow. Egypt's armies are fractured, its nobles rebellious. He cannot march north. He cannot avenge Syria. And everyone in the hall knows it. The fall of Damascus sends tremors through the entire Islamic world. In Mecca, pilgrims whisper in disbelief. How could God allow the city once blessed by the Prophet's companions to burn? In Baghdad, already a ghost of its former self, the scholars mourn what they call the end of the old world. In Istanbul, still under Byzantine rule at the time, merchants watch the horizon nervously. If Timur's horsemen could cross Persia and Syria, what city is safe? In Cairo's mosques, the preachers thunder from the pulpits. This is punishment for our arrogance, cries one. The Mamluks trusted in their swords and forgot the will of God. But in the alleys outside, the people whisper a different truth. Timur's shadow has no end. If Damascus has fallen, what hope have we? For the first time in 2 centuries, the Mamluk Sultanate trembles. Its empire, once stretching from the Nile to the Euphrates, now feels paper-thin. The very soldiers who had defeated the Mongols at Ain Jalut are gone, replaced by factions bickering over titles and gold. You walk through the streets of Cairo and feel the mood. Anxious, brittle, uncertain. In the spice markets, traders from the north tell stories of Timur's cruelty. He builds pyramids of heads, one insists, and on top he sits and drinks wine. The listeners shake their heads in disbelief, but fear glimmers behind their eyes. In the citadel, the Sultan's advisors debate whether to send envoys to Timur, to sue for peace, or to challenge him in the name of Islam. The elder statesman Tagribirdi warns, "You cannot reason with fire, it consumes until there is nothing left." Faraj scowls but says nothing. Meanwhile, the survivors of Damascus trickle south. Merchants, scholars, refugees. They bring stories and relics. A fragment of Quranic calligraphy saved from the mosque, a few pages of Ibn Khaldun's writings, a child's wooden toy carved from the ruins. Each story adds another layer to the legend of the city's fall. Among the refugees is a poet named Ibn al-Wadi, who recites his verses before the court. The flame that devoured. Damascus has not gone out. It travels now in men's hearts, a warning and a wound. The Sultan listens, silent. His ministers call for vengeance, but they know Egypt cannot fight the monster from the east. Timur's armies now control the entire Levant. Only the deserts and the Red Sea separate them from Cairo. In Damascus itself, Timur's soldiers are gone, but the city bears their brand. The smoke has lifted, revealing streets blackened like the pages of a burned book. The survivors dig graves until the earth itself seems tired of opening. They bury whole families together, no names, only prayers. The sound of the adhan returns, softer now, as if the city is whispering its faith rather than declaring it. When Timur finally marches toward Baghdad, leaving Syria behind, his army moves like a storm receding. Devastation in its wake, silence in its shadow. He carries with him the treasures of Damascus, silver from its mosques, books from its libraries, and the finest craftsmen of its guilds. The chroniclers say he paused once before leaving, standing at the edge of the Barada River, watching the smoke drift over the valley. "It was a beautiful city," he murmured, "and now it belongs to eternity." Then he rode on, leaving only his footprints in the ash. Back in Cairo, Sultan Faraj finally musters an army. He marches north, too late, and with too few men. The winter rains drown the roads, disease sweeps the camps. He reaches Gaza, hears that Timur has already crossed the Euphrates again, and turns back. His soldiers curse him. His generals whisper rebellion. The empire begins to fracture from within. The poets of the age understand before the rulers do that the fall of Damascus marks more than the ruin of a city. It marks the end of an era. The unity of Islam's great empires, the Abbasids, the Mamluks, the heirs of Saladin, has shattered. The world of scholars, merchants and travellers who once moved freely from Cairo to Samarkand is now divided by fire and fear. Yet even in this darkness, the story of Damascus spreads not as defeat, but as defiance. Refugees tell of women who refused to flee their homes, of imams who recited the Quran as the mosque burned around them, of artisans who rebuilt their workshops before the ashes cooled. The city's name becomes a prayer, a memory of endurance. Years later, when Timur's own empire begins to crumble, and his grandsons fight over Samarkand, travellers returning from Syria will tell him, Damascus has risen again. And if ghosts can frown, perhaps his did. Because for all his armies and his towers of skulls, even Timur could not erase what the people of Damascus carried inside them. The stubborn, shimmering conviction that cities can die 1,000 deaths and still find their way back to life. When Timur's army finally vanishes into the east, the land it leaves behind feels hollow, a silence after thunder, the smell of smoke, clinging to everything. But even ruin, given enough time, begins to breathe again. And in Damascus the slow heartbeat of life stirs once more beneath the ashes. Spring arrives early that year. Rain falls on the blackened ruins, hissing against the charred stones. The people call it the mercy rain. For weeks they collect it in jars, washing the soot from their faces, the bitterness from their throats. Green shoots push up through the burned gardens of Gauta. It feels like a whisper from God. Life, fragile and insistent, returning to the earth that fire tried to erase. You walk through the streets, and you see it everywhere. Tiny signs of stubborn hope. A mason rebuilds his shop with stones scavenged from collapsed walls. A baker shapes dough from the last of his flour and shares bread with the neighbours who helped him bury his sons. A young boy sells jasmine garlands in a street that still smells faintly of smoke. When asked why, he shrugs and says, "Because it's Damascus. It must smell sweet." The surviving scholars meet under the broken dome of the Umayyad Mosque, what's left of it. Only 2 walls still stand, but they gather there every evening reading from salvaged manuscripts and reciting poetry by lamplight. One of them, an old jurist with burns on his hands, reads aloud, "Every empire dies, but the word endures." The listeners murmur Amin. As they rebuild, the people begin to tell stories, not of Timur, but of those who defied him. They speak of Sheikh al-Khatib, who stood on the mosque's minbar and refused to flee. Of the women of Bab al-Faraj, who carried water to soldiers while the city burned. Of the orphaned children who found each other in the ruins and built shelters from shattered doors. Each retelling becomes sharper, cleaner, until memory itself turns into myth. The conqueror fades into the background, and the survivors take centre stage. The Mamluk Sultanate, though humiliated, still rules Egypt. In Cairo, Sultan Faraj's court sent emissaries to Damascus, bringing gold, architects and supplies. They promise restoration, not vengeance. "We will rebuild," the Sultan declares. But his messengers find the city already rebuilding itself, stone by stone, prayer by prayer. For every palace Timur destroyed, 10 new homes rise. For every burned madrasa, a teacher gathers children under a tree. The sound of hammers replaces the sound of mourning. The rhythm of life returns, slow, uneven, but steady. The artisans who survived begin to work again. They carve new wooden panels for the mosque, weave carpets from dyed scraps, melt broken glass into windows. Every piece bears the same motif: the flame and the flower, fire that burns and life that grows. It becomes a symbol of the city's rebirth. Meanwhile, across the Islamic world, Damascus becomes legend. In Cairo, storytellers in the coffee houses recite the tragedy of Timur, a tale of hubris and divined justice. In Istanbul, travellers speak of a city that rose from ashes like a bird of paradise. In Samarkand, scholars whisper that Timur died haunted by dreams of the city he destroyed, hearing its call to prayer in his sleep, and maybe he did. For when Timur finally falls ill years later on his campaign toward China, his chroniclers record strange behaviour. He mutters about smoke. He demands the sound of flowing water near his tent. "Do you hear it?" he asks. "The river that forgives?" He dies not on a battlefield but in a snowstorm, cold, breathless, far from the warmth of the gardens he burned. But in Damascus that same year, the Bereda River overflows its banks for the first time in memory, flooding the lower gardens. The people take it as a sign. God has washed away the fire. They wade into the water, laughing, crying, scooping mud into their hands like holy relics. In the years that follow, Damascus regains its place as a crossroads of learning and faith. Scholars return, trade routes reopen, and the scent of spice and leather fills the markets again. New rulers rise and fall, Mamluks, Ottomans, kings, presidents, but none can erase what the city learned in 1400, that civilization is not marble or gold, but people who refuse to vanish. The descendants of those who lived through the fire carry the memory in their bones. Even centuries later, when travellers ask how Damascus endured, the locals smile and answer simply, "We had no choice." At night under the stars, the rebuilt Umayyad Mosque gleams once more. The lamps reflect off its polished marble. The call to prayer drifts over the river, and the gardens of Kuta bloom again, jasmine, fig, apricot. The air smells alive. But if you listen closely, you can still hear something beneath it all. The faint echo of drums, the whisper of flames, the sound of history breathing through the stones. The people do not forget. They never will, because memory, like Damascus itself, cannot be conquered. The chroniclers will later say that Timur's siege was the most brutal in the city's long life, worse even than the Mongols, worse than Crusaders. But they also agree on something else. It was not the end. It was proof that a city can burn and still endure, that faith can falter and still return, that even paradise can be remade from ruin. And when travellers centuries later walk through the Souk al-Hamidiyya and catch the scent of jasmine carried on the breeze, they won't know the names of those who rebuilt it, but the air itself will remember. Centuries pass, and yet the scars of 1400 never quite fade from Damascus. The city endures, rebuilt, repainted, repopulated, but the memory of Timur's fire lingers in its stones like a faint heat that never cools. Ask any old Damascene, and they'll tell you, every jasmine plant grows from the ashes of something lost. By the late 15th century, the Mamluk Sultanate has rebuilt the city into something close to its former brilliance. The Umayyad Mosque stands proud again, its dome repaired, its courtyard once more filled with light and water. The bazaar of Al-Hamidiyya hums with traders calling out prices in Turkish, Persian, Arabic, Greek. Silks hang from every stall and the air smells of rosewater, cardamom and iron. You walk through it, centuries after the flames, and it's hard to believe this place was ever a graveyard. The marble gleams, the fountains murmur. But listen long enough, and you'll catch the faint echo of the past in every splash of water, every clang of a hammer, like ghosts still at work rebuilding what they loved. The people of Damascus have turned survival into an art. The architects who rebuilt the city didn't just restore it, they improved it, strengthening its walls, carving inscriptions above the gates. He who destroys shall be forgotten. He who rebuilds shall live. It's a quiet rebuke to Timur, whispered across time. In 1516, the city braces for war again. The Ottoman Empire is rising to the north, and its armies sweep down from Anatolia like a tide. The Mamluks, once proud conquerors themselves, prepare to defend their realm, but this time, the people of Damascus do not fear as they did in Timur's day. They have learned that no matter how the banners change, the city remains. When the Ottoman Sultan Selim Thuthan marches into Syria after the Battle of Majd-Dabieh, Damascus surrenders without resistance. The citizens line the streets, offering flowers and water instead of swords. We have seen enough fire, the scholars say. Let this conquest be one of peace. And so it is. Selim, unlike Timur, enters the city in reverence. He visits the Umayyad Mosque barefoot, bowing his head at the tomb of Saladin. He prays there, not as a conqueror but as a pilgrim. To the people of Damascus it feels like healing. The Ottomans rebuild the city's infrastructure, restore its aqueducts and plant trees along the Brada again. Under Ottoman rule, Damascus becomes once more the beating heart of the Arab world, a crossroads of pilgrims on their way to Mecca, a hub for merchants from 3 continents, and a centre of art and learning. The sound of hammering in the workshops, the laughter from tea houses, the rustle of parchment in the schools, all speak to a city reborn. But the people never forget what fire taught them. When the plague strikes in the 17th century, they bury their dead quietly and keep the markets open the next day. When earthquakes rattle the city, they rebuild the fallen walls without waiting for imperial aid. When the empire taxes them into poverty, they joke, "Empires come and go, but Damascus sells figs forever." Even the poets remember. A century after Timur's death, the scholar Al-Suyuti writes, "The fire of the lame conqueror did not kill Damascus, it baptized it." Another, Ibn Tulun, pens the line still recited by Damascenes today, "The city burns, but it is never consumed." And time, that old healer and destroyer, does its work. Timur's name fades from memory, his empire swallowed by others, his monuments crumbling under their own weight, but Damascus remains. Empires trade crowns over it, the Ottomans, the French, the British, and later the new republics of men. But the soul of the city refuses ownership. You walk through the ancient quarter at dusk, and you realize why. The call to prayer rises, weaving through the streets like smoke, but this time it's the smoke of incense, not fire. The air smells of jasmine again. The lamps flicker warm and soft against the carved wood balconies, each one a reminder that beauty has survived here longer than any conqueror. Children play by the river where Timur once stood. Lovers meet in the shadow of the mosque he nearly destroyed. The same stars that watched the siege now shine down on wedding processions and laughter. The same stones that burned under catapult fire now bear the footprints of tourists, merchants, and pilgrims. Yet the city does not forget. Every generation tells its own version of the story. The fire that came from the east, the tyrant who burned paradise, and the people who rebuilt it with bare hands. It's no longer a tale of tragedy, but of identity. We are Damascenes, they say. We rise from the ashes because we have done it before. Somewhere in the bazaar, a poet recites to a small crowd, "The conqueror thought he could turn our sky to ash, but God sent rain. He thought he could bury our faith, but we planted jasmine in his footprints." The listeners smile, nodding to the rhythm of his words, and drop coins into his bowl. A child tugs at his mother's sleeve, whispering, "Who was Timur?" The mother laughs softly. "A man who thought he could stop Damascus." Centuries have turned his conquest into a fable, a warning, a reminder that all tyrants burn bright and die quickly. The city he sought to erase is still here, breathing, glowing under the same sun. And if you listen closely, standing beneath the golden dome of the Umayyad Mosque as the evening wind brushes through its courtyards, you might almost hear the voice of the city itself, calm, ancient, unbroken. I have seen fire before. The centuries roll forward, and Damascus remains what it has always been, an old soul wearing new clothes. Empires fall, flags change, tongues shift, but the rhythm of the city never stops. The same alleys that once echoed with the hoofbeats of Timur's horsemen now ring with the calls of vendors selling fruit, the laughter of children chasing pigeons through the courtyards of the Umayyad Mosque, and the murmur of scholars in its shadowed arcades. Still, every generation carries the memory of the fire, not as fear anymore, but as a lesson. We were burned once, the elders say, and from that smoke we learned patience. That phrase becomes almost a creed in Damascus, a kind of moral backbone. When times grow hard, when famine strikes, when the Nile floods, when distant rulers demand impossible taxes, people quote it softly, half in humour, half in faith. We were burned once. Under the Ottomans, the city thrives again, rising from one of the worst catastrophes in Islamic history to become the pride of the empire's Arab provinces. Pilgrims from Morocco to Central Asia pass through its gates on their way to Mecca. Every year, the Damascus caravan, known as the Hajj al-Sham, departs amid cheers and drums, carrying tens of thousands toward the Hijaz. The procession is led by the Amir al-Hajj, usually a Syrian noble, and escorted by soldiers who camp along the desert route, a moving river of faith. When the caravan departs, the city empties for days, its streets suddenly quiet, as if Damascus itself holds its breath. And when the pilgrims return months later, the whole city turns out to greet them, a celebration of return, of life, of endurance. "See," they say, "even the desert could not take us." Yet in the quiet nights, when the lamps glow under the old stone arches, the city remembers the long shadow of fire. The poets never let it die. One verse, written in the 16th century, becomes famous across the Islamic world. "They burned our gardens and we planted stars. They took our books and we became the story." Those words are painted on walls, copied into manuscripts, and whispered in tea houses for centuries to come. They become a kind of unofficial motto of Damascus, humble and proud at once. The Ottomans rule for 400 years, and though they are foreign masters, they respect the city's dignity. They rebuild its aqueducts, repair its walls, and restore its schools. The great Souk al-Hamidiyah is roofed again in iron, and its merchants fill it with Persian carpets, Indian spices, and Damascene steel. The sound of the blacksmith's hammer returns, that steady heartbeat the city has always known. When plague sweeps through the Levant, the people of Damascus bury their dead and reopen their shops the next morning. The living, they say, must honour the dead by working. When earthquakes strike, they rebuild the same houses on the same foundations. If the ground breaks, they joke, we will just build closer to heaven. You stand at the western gate one spring evening, and the scent of jasmine fills the air. The Barada River murmurs nearby, and the minarets glow gold in the fading light. For a moment you forget the centuries of blood and empire. You see only a city that refuses to die. But history, being what it is, always circles back. The 19th century brings new storms, revolts, invasions, and the slow collapse of Ottoman power. European powers begin to eye the old city like treasure waiting to be claimed. The French send archaeologists and soldiers. The British send consuls and spies. Still, Damascus remains indifferent. Empires come, the locals say, and ask for tea. During the chaos of the First World War, the Ottomans retreat, and for the first time in centuries Damascus stands free, briefly. The Arab revolt led by Sharif Hussein and his sons enters the city in 1918. Crowds flood the streets, waving banners of Arab unity, shouting, "Freedom! The Turks are gone!" For a brief golden season, it feels like the city is breathing the same air it knew in its youth. But history, ever mischievous, has other plans. The French arrive in 1920, claiming mandates and protectorates. When the people of Damascus resist, French warplanes bomb the city, the first foreign fire since Timur's day. The shells hit the Souk al-Hamidiyah, the same place where his flames once danced. Smoke fills the streets again, and for a moment it seems that the ghost of 1400 has returned, dressed in modern uniform. When it's over, the French occupy the city. But the people's spirit does not bow. A local poet writes in defiance, "They burned us with swords, now with machines, yet we still breathe jasmine." The French soldiers laugh when they hear it. They don't understand that it's not just poetry, it's prophecy. Because after 25 years, the French are gone. The city survives again, as it always has. Independence comes, and Damascus becomes the capital of modern Syria, ancient heart now beating inside a new body. Cars replace caravans, radio towers rise beside minarets, and yet nothing essential changes. The rhythm remains, the faith remains, the memory remains. Walk its streets today and you'll still find the traces of every age. Roman columns beside Ottoman gates, Mamluk courtyards beneath electric lights, and somewhere deep beneath your feet, the faint smell of smoke from 1400. It's not haunting, it's heritage. Because the Damascenes learned something the rest of the world still struggles with, that history's fire doesn't end you. It shapes you, it forges you, the way a blacksmith tempers steel. And every night as the muezzin's call rises once more from the rebuilt mosque, echoing over the roofs and the river, you can almost hear the city whisper to the stars, gentle and proud. We were burned once, and we are still here. Time, that tireless mason, keeps laying new layers atop the old. Damascus enters the mid-20th century carrying every century before it, like a tree carrying its rings. Cars rattle over Roman paving stones, electric wires loop between Mamluk balconies. Children play football in the courtyards where caliphs once held court. History here isn't a museum, it's a roommate. You walk down Straight Street where St. Paul once saw the light and see shopkeepers sweeping dust from doorways older than most nations. The city smells of diesel, coffee and jasmine, the same mixture of the living and the eternal. On a good morning you can almost believe the world has finally left Damascus in peace, but peace is a restless visitor. After the French depart in 1946, independence brings pride and turmoil in equal measure. The new Syrian Republic struggles to find its footing. Coups come and go, flags change like seasons. In the cafes old men joke, our government changes more often than the call to prayer. Yet through it all, the city endures, stubborn and half-smiling. The Umayyad Mosque becomes once again the heart of everything. Faith, politics, gossip, and rest. Pilgrims from every corner of the Islamic world come to see the marble that glows gold at sunset. They touch the cool stone and whisper the same words generations have whispered, "She still stands." The 1950s bring radios, buses, and movie theatres. Damascus hums with new energy. Students argue about socialism and scripture in the same breath. Poets recite in smoky rooms, mixing Quranic rhythm with revolutionary fire. Yet behind the neon and slogans, the ancient lesson still lingers. Pride burns, patience rebuilds. When wars erupt around it, Palestine in 1948, the Suez in 56, the 6 Days in 67, the city braces but does not break. Refugees arrive by the thousands, and Damascus, used to housing survivors, makes room. Apartments overflow, courtyards fill with tents. "We have always been a city of return," an old woman tells a journalist. "Ask the ghosts of 1400, they came back too." The 1970s bring a new order under Hafez al-Assad. Power centralizes, fear thickens, yet the streets still smell of cardamom coffee and the markets still sing. The regime builds monuments to endurance, concrete symbols of what the people already know by heart. When asked how they survive dictatorship after fire and plague, a shopkeeper shrugs. "We have seen worse, my friend. This is only politics." And in the quiet hours before dawn, when the muezzin's calls overlap like threads of silk across the valley, the city feels timeless again. The Barada River glides past gardens reborn for the 100th time. Jasmine creeps over bullet holes and bomb scars as if to say, not yet, not the end. Then, in 2011, the drums return, not the war drums of Timur, but the protests, chants and gunfire of a new civil war. The modern age discovers that fire still knows the way to Damascus. Shells fall where catapults once landed. Smoke curls over neighbourhoods that hadn't burned in centuries. The city trembles, remembering. But this time the world is watching through cameras, not chronicles. The footage spreads faster than the flames. People everywhere see the same stubborn miracle repeat itself. Even as bombs fall, shopkeepers reopen. Even as snipers fire, a muezzin still calls to prayer. A poet writes online, "We are living the 13th century again, only with electricity. Through siege, starvation and sorrow, Damascus keeps breathing. The hospitals fill, the power flickers, yet at night the sound of children laughing drifts through broken windows. They play among ruins like their ancestors did, inventing games from dust and sunlight. And when the fighting finally slows, the survivors emerge, thin, tired, eyes full of centuries, and start sweeping the streets, always sweeping, always rebuilding. One man paints 'We will live' on a shattered wall in red spray paint. It's not rebellion. It's identity. In the spring that follows, the jasmine blooms again. It's smaller, weaker, but unmistakably there. A fragrance older than empires, proof that something deeper than politics or war keeps this city alive. You stand once more before the Umayyad Mosque, its marble patched and scarred but shining in the dawn. Pigeons whirl above the courtyard. The muezzin begins his call, his voice cracking slightly through a cheap speaker, and somehow it sounds perfect. Fragile, human, eternal. All around, the city stirs. Shop shutters rising, children hurrying to school, women bargaining over vegetables. The same rhythm, the same heartbeat, carrying through 1,000 years of empire and ruin. And you realize, Damascus is not a city that survives despite history. It survives by remembering it. Every fire feeds its roots. Every conqueror leaves behind a layer of wisdom, pain, and beauty that becomes part of the soil. Timur's name is forgotten by most who walk these streets now, but his lesson is everywhere. In the calm faces, the patient hands, the quiet faith that rebuilds without complaint. The people do not curse the fire anymore. They thank it for teaching them who they are. When night falls, lights flicker across the old city like a constellation reborn. The air cools, the jasmine opens, and the city exhales. Somewhere a storyteller begins, as they always do. Once, long ago, Damascus burned. And someone else smiles and answers, yes, and then she lived. If you stand on Mount Kasyoun at night, the view of Damascus looks almost unreal. A river of lights winding through the valley, minarets rising like stars from the earth, the soft hum of prayer and traffic blending into a single ancient melody. From here, you can see the outline of every age the city has ever lived through. The domes of the Umayyad Mosque, the narrow arteries of the old city, the modern skyline flickering beyond. And beneath it all, hidden in the soil and stones, are the ashes of 1400, still there, still whispering. Timur's fire feels like legend now, a story told more often in coffeehouses than in classrooms. Tour guides point at the citadel and say, "Here the great conqueror entered." Children giggle, imagining a lame man on a horse who thought he could defeat a city older than time. Their laughter is the best revenge history ever devised. You wander down into the heart of the city, through streets that smell of fresh bread, oil lamps, and orange blossom. The people move with a kind of quiet dignity that no empire has ever managed to erase. Every face, every hand seems to carry a story of survival, of patience, of faith stronger than stone. And maybe that's what Damascus truly is. Not a city built of marble and minarets, but of memory. Its people have become its walls. Their endurance is its architecture. In the old quarter, you pass a courtyard where artisans hammer silver into filigree bowls. each pattern a labyrinth of delicate lines. "We work slow here," one of them says, smiling without looking up, "because time owes us nothing." On the wall behind him hangs a verse painted in graceful Arabic. "The flame devours, the rain restores, and the heart endures." That phrase has become almost a civic creed. Even in modern Syria, with its struggles and contradictions, you hear it everywhere. In classrooms, in songs, in prayers. It's how Damascenes explain their city to strangers. It's how they explain themselves to history. And yet the memory of ruin has not softened them into melancholy. If anything, it's given them humour, that sharp, ironic edge of those who have seen the world end before, and learned to sip coffee while it happens. A shopkeeper in the souk once told a journalist, "We have seen every empire burn. When the next one comes, we'll sell it souvenirs." This humour, this resilience, it's what makes the city eternal. Because the truth is, Damascus isn't the oldest city because it never fell. It's the oldest because it always rose again. Each fall taught it something new. Each conqueror left behind not just wounds, but lessons on power, patience, mercy, and survival. Sometimes, when the air is still and the sky deep with stars, you can almost hear those lessons carried on the wind. The hum of the Barada River below, the rustle of jasmine vines against old walls, they sound like history breathing. You stop at the Umayyad Mosque, still gleaming under the moonlight. The marble is smooth from centuries of hands brushing against it, centuries of prayers whispered against its walls. Inside, the lamps hang low, casting golden halos over the courtyard. Pigeons nest in the arches, children chase them, their laughter echoing softly. And standing there, you can imagine it. The siege, the fire, the smoke. You can almost smell it. But it feels distant now, as if it happened to another world. The fire failed to kill what mattered most. The city's soul simply stepped aside, waited, and returned when the flames were done. That's what Damascus does. It outwaits destruction. The poets of every age have tried to capture this secret. One wrote, "She dies each century, and each time her eyes open brighter. The world grows old, but she stays young in ruins." Another wrote simply, "Damascus is God's patience made stone." And maybe that's true. For even now, when the world beyond her walls grows loud and uncertain, with wars, technology, and noise, Damascus moves at her own rhythm. The market still wakes before dawn. The same call to prayer still drifts over the rooftops. The same wind still carries the scent of figs and smoke. You meet a young man repairing tiles on a mosque wall. His hands are dusted with blue pigment, his clothes threadbare, but his face is calm. "Do you ever get tired of rebuilding?" you ask him. He looks up, smiles, and says, "You rebuild a house once. You rebuild Damascus forever. That's the secret. The city's survival isn't luck. It's labour. Quiet, relentless, generational labour. The kind that doesn't shout or rush. The kind that plants jasmine knowing it might burn, and plants it anyway." From the mountain, the lights of Damascus begin to fade one by one as the city sleeps. But the glow that remains, soft, golden, unyielding, isn't electricity. It's something older, deeper, a kind of memory that refuses to die. For 7,000 years, the city has stood here, under conquerors, prophets, traders, and tyrants, and every one of them left believing they had conquered it. None of them did. And maybe that's the final irony, that the city Timur thought he had burned into legend has become legend precisely because he failed. His fire became her light. So when the night breeze stirs the scent of jasmine, and the call to prayer floats across the valley once more, you realise the fire never won. It only made the stars shine brighter. Dawn comes softly to Damascus. The sky blushes pale gold over the mountains, and the city wakes with the same slow grace it has known for thousands of years. The Barada River murmurs through the orchards, the first vendors open their shutters, and somewhere deep in the old quarter, a rooster crows, the same sound that must have echoed even in Timur's day. The night has ended, and the world continues, as it always does here. You stand once more in the courtyard of the Umayyad Mosque, where the marble gleams with morning light. The air is cool and smells faintly of rosewater from the fountains. A few worshippers sit beneath the colonnades, reciting softly from the Quran, their voices weaving into the hum of pigeons cooing in the eaves. Everything feels slower now, older, eternal. If you listen closely, you can almost hear the layers of history breathing beneath the calm, the thud of siege drums, the cry of the muezzin, the laughter of traders, the silence after fire. Each one is still here, folded inside the sound of running water. Damascus never forgets, but it forgives in the way only the truly ancient can. The city has lived through plague, flood, empire, and war. It has been Roman, Umayyad, Mamluk, Ottoman, French, and Syrian, and yet it has always remained itself. Empires come as storms do, loud, terrifying, and brief. Damascus endures like stone after rain. The modern city hums beyond the old walls. Cars, horns, radios, the heartbeat of a new world. But here, in the ancient quarter, time moves differently. A boy chases pigeons under the arches. A woman lights a candle beside the shrine of John the Baptist. A shopkeeper sweeps dust from a mosaic that survived 5 centuries of earthquakes and conquest. Life, simple and persistent, has replaced glory as the city's greatest treasure. When tourists ask, "How old is Damascus?" the locals laugh. Older than forgetting, they say. And it's true. This place does not measure itself in years, or rulers, or wars. It measures itself in mornings like this one, the kind that come after long nights of ruin and still find light. Somewhere nearby, an old storyteller begins his morning tale to a circle of listeners. The same story he's told his entire life, and the same his grandfather told before him. Once upon a time, a man from the east came with fire. He said he would turn our heaven into ashes, and he did. But when he left, the ashes turned to soil, and from that soil, jasmine grew. The crowd listens quietly, nodding. A child asks, "Did the man return?" The storyteller smiles. "No, my child. Fire never returns to where it failed." That is how Damascus remembers Timur, not as a curse but as a teacher. His conquest is now part of the city's story of endurance, a reminder that even devastation can be turned into wisdom. The people no longer curse his name. They thank him in a strange way for showing them that nothing, not armies, not flames, not centuries, could destroy them. The wind shifts, carrying the scent of fresh bread from the market and the sharp sweetness of citrus from the gardens beyond the walls. The jasmine vines, reborn from the ruins, bloom again, spilling their perfume over balconies and courtyards. The white petals fall like snow on the cobblestones, soft as forgiveness. As the sun climbs higher, the call to prayer begins. That same melody that has sounded over the city since before memory. It rises over rooftops, echoes off minarets, and drifts out across the hills. Every note seems to say the same thing. We are still here. You close your eyes and let it wash over you. The drums are gone, the fire long extinguished, but the heartbeat of Damascus remains steady. In that sound you hear the truth of this place, not tragedy, not victory, but endurance. Because this is what the city has always known, that survival is not loud or heroic. It's quiet, patient, and deeply human. It's sweeping the same street your ancestors swept after a siege. It's planting trees where the ashes are still warm. It's whispering prayers even when no one seems to be listening. As the day brightens, people fill the streets. Vendors calling out prices, children laughing, scholars discussing verses beneath the trees. The sound of living rises again, drowning out the past's silence. Damascus has found its balance once more. Between memory and hope, between ruin and renewal. And now, as the breeze moves through the old city carrying the scent of jasmine and dust, you understand why this place has never died. It isn't just stone and history, it's faith, it's rhythm, it's the refusal to let despair have the last word. The barada glints in the sunlight. The pigeons scatter in the courtyard. The muezzin's final note fades into the air, and somewhere in that soft quiet, the city seems to speak. Not in words, but in a feeling that fills your chest like light. I have burned 1,000 times, and yet I remain. I am Damascus. I endure. The city quiets again as evening falls. Lamps flicker to life along the ancient streets, their glow soft and golden against the stone. The wind sighs through the courtyards, rustling the jasmine vines, carrying with it the faint hum of life winding down. The noise of the market fades, replaced by the rhythmic murmur of prayer, of footsteps, of laughter slipping through open windows. The air is warm, scented with bread and roses. Somewhere a flute plays, slow, wistful, like memory itself. The sound drifts up toward the darkening sky, blending with the whispers of the river. You take a breath, and it feels like breathing history. The fire, the conquest, the centuries, all of it dissolves into this gentle calm. The city doesn't shout its endurance anymore. It hums it, quietly, endlessly. The stars begin to appear above the minarets one by one. They look familiar, the same ones that watch the city burn, now watching it sleep. And as you listen to the hush that settles over Damascus, you realize the truth at last. The story never ends. The fire never wins. The city never truly sleeps. It dreams softly of tomorrow. And somewhere deep within its walls, in the scent of jasmine and the shimmer of starlight, Damascus whispers its last lullaby. I remember everything. I forgive everything. I live. Good night, sweet dreams.